Welcome to Books on Air, the podcast that tells the story behind the book. It includes insights from authors about how they compose their work, what inspires them, and what they hope you'll take away from their book. Here's your host for this episode of Books on Air, Suzanne Harris.
Welcome to the Books on Air podcast. I'm Sloan Fremont, filling in for Suzanne Harris. This is a podcast where listeners get the secret story behind every book. Joining me today is Menamin, author of the book, Mary Whyte Was Right Pedro. This book tells the tale of several teenagers living in Northern Ireland during troubled times as they mature, face challenges, and realize the power of one encounter. Billy, welcome to the Books on Air podcast. I'm so happy you're here.
I'm glad to be here. So Thank you very much.
Yeah. So let's start out maybe by telling the audience just a little bit about yourself and what led you to write your book, Mary Whyte Was Right, Pedro.
Well, it came about because I was driving through town one day and they were developing a site. They were demolishing some buildings to develop in town. And I realized that one of the buildings that was knocked down was a place called the Flamingo Ballroom, which was where as teenagers we used to go to dance and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And it's just the thinking of that dropped into my mind an encounter we had, a couple of us with three girls, one of whom, and during the conversation, said that she didn't kiss anybody because it spread diseases.
Oh,
so,
wow.
That came into my mind. And I thought maybe a story to be told around that.
Yeah.
So that was the basis for writing the book. I then took the book and wrote it partly out of my own lived experience and a bit of imagination and that sort of thing. So that was the start of the book. And then as the book was being written, it sort of took different directions. I intended it simply to be about a love story that couldn't be because people were on different sides of the argument or different sides of the tracks or whatever. And that was just supposedly the main theme of the book. Then other things developed, Sloan, and it became a bit of a twists and turns, and you just didn't know where it was going for a wee while, but we got there in the end.
Yeah, so you had an idea when you started where you thought it was going to go, but the story kind of maybe took a life of its own as you started writing it.
That's right. That's right.
Amazing. Yeah, I love hearing stories about this. This is so interesting to hear the process of writing because creativity is so, sometimes we think it's this linear track, but when we explore it and we let it go different directions, it ends up taking us places that we couldn't have imagined when we started.
Yes, there are so many themes that actually are mentioned in the book, but I don't consider myself that my responsibility as the author of the book to develop those themes and put forward a conclusion about them. I would rather the readers would read it and something would ping in their minds and they would then think about it and come to their own conclusion.
Right.
So I'm not going sort of explaining the thing. There are things that are mentioned and then it's up to the reader to either take it and run with it or not.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, wonderful. So is the scene then set in Ireland?
Yes, it's in Ireland, and it's the teenagers growing up. They were teenagers in 1969. That's when really the trouble started in Northern Ireland. And they grew up and right through until the Good Friday Agreement was signed in 1998, I think it was. And they're growing up and maturing during that period.
Okay.
And it's what happens to them. One of them leaves and goes to England and becomes very wealthy and then has a dying wish, and that dying wish then is passed on to one of the other friends who has to, if he's to succeed in managing to put the dying wish together, he has to step outside his comfort zone on a number of occasions,
Yeah.
and in a number of ways. And then at the end of it, then the dying wish is achieved. It's there, and the girl that he was charged with involving in this, she is the girl she's Mary Whyte, the girl who said that kissing spread diseases.
Oh, okay.
She's involved in this. He's involved in this, and the fact that the two of them, coming from different sides of the religious background in Northern Ireland, the fact that they're working together on that is a wee bit of a surprise in itself. But it ends up that there are things that happen, and the book ends up with him sitting thinking to himself that when he sees Mary and what she's doing, he's sitting thinking to himself that the two of them, not him and Mary, but Mary and his other friend, will be together one day in paradise.
Oh wow.
So that's how it ends. But
well,
sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, go ahead.
It's the turns and twists in between that really I had a wee bit of fun with writing, because they come quite a lot out of my imagination.
Yeah. So who was your favorite character to write about in the book?
Probably my favorite character would have been the guy nicknamed Rodin.
Okay.
And there's a wee bit of explanation at the beginning of the book of how that comes about. Not because I wish I was him, but just simply because he was able to leave and make a career for himself and make a life for himself that he never would have achieved in Northern Ireland. Mm-hmm. And that is pretty typical. Again, that's a theme in the book of sort of exporting the best talent. And in Northern Ireland, we have for years, many years, for the last 60 or 70 years, I've heard about it being the brain drain, where young people go away to university, either to Dublin or Scotland or England, mm-hmm. and that because of the sort of underlying sectarianism of society in Northern Ireland, they just never come back. They marry, settle down, and these places, and they just don't come. But they may come back for a visit, but that's all. They don't come back to live.
Yeah.
And that's something that I very nearly did in my young days, mm-hmm. But I didn't do it. And I thought, well, this was a character that I could write about, and that maybe in some ways I wish I had been.
Yeah, the other path that,
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, interesting. Yeah. So can you maybe share one of your favorite scenes in the book that you got to write about, or maybe one of because we don't want to give the book away, of course, but
no. We want people to buy the book.
Right. Just one of the.
Mary Whyte Was Right Pedro.
Right. And I'll link to the Amazon link in the show notes for the listeners, so they'll be able to find it easily. But maybe could you share a favorite scene with us, or a favorite maybe lesson or theme that was in the book that you wrote about?
Well, one of the themes that I did write about, I'll maybe give you a couple of answers to that question. One of the themes that I did write about, which would be fairly important in the Northern Ireland setup, is that one of the guys, the guy who Rodin wanted to perform his dying wish, was a fundamental conservative religious person.
Okay.
And he, he then had to struggle with all that he had believed up until that point, because this was such a challenge for him. And finding Mary and working with her was obviously another challenge. So one of the scenes in the book that I think is pivotal is where he is waiting on his flight back to Northern Ireland, because he's had to go to London, and what's going through his mind, about how there's been so many things that challenged his thought process, and basically challenged the life he had lived up to that point. And he then was having to reassess in many ways.
Yeah.
So that was one of the scenes that I did enjoy writing, and that is a theme through the book. But there are other themes too, where at the beginning, where the boys they're together, and they're all called Billy. The 4 boys are called Billy. So they give each other nicknames so that they know who's talking to who.
Now, was that real? Was that a real thing that happened?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that happens frequently among young people here. Yeah. And so I enjoyed writing that scene as well, right at the front of the book. But I enjoyed writing it all, actually, because it was, and the one of the things that I do want people to understand from the book is just how much the normal people in Northern Ireland were, if you like, heroes of that time. Because yes, there were an awful lot of violence going on. There was an awful lot of horrible things happening. But in general, people just kept their heads down, kept out of trouble, and got on with living the best life they could.
Yeah. And
that applied right from the street sweeper to the brain surgeon. There was no difference. Society kept on going. And over 30 years of the Troubles, the people who were in combat, shall we say, the combatants, were, over 30 years, they came to realize that everything was going on as normal, and they were at a stalemate. And that was one of the motivating factors for coming together and thrashing out the Good Friday Agreement. And I want people to understand just how the normal people in society had a role to play in not getting involved in keeping society going the way it should, and I want that to be acknowledged. The other thing that I want to be acknowledged again is fundamental conservatism in any subject or in any sphere, usually as a blight on relationships, because the conservative part of it seeks for tradition and stability and structure, and the fundamental part of it seeks for being right and wrong, and if I'm right, then you have to be wrong if you disagree with me, and all that sort of thing. So I would like that to come through in the book as well, and I think it does.
Yeah, it sounds like so many life lessons in your book, and from the being willing to reevaluate beliefs and things that maybe we thought, and that is a struggle when you're in a situation and you are faced with looking at what you believe, and does this really serve me anymore? But then also the historical side of what it was like to be in Ireland during those times, and how, like you said, society still keeps going, and that is a part of the role in all of it too. Yeah. So it sounds like there's a lot of life lessons in what you were able to write too.
Yeah. Well, it owes a lot to my lived experience. Yes, it does.
So can you tell us a little bit about maybe what surprised you most about writing the book?
What surprised me most was I thought I could remain quite detached as I was writing the book.
Yeah.
But there were some instances where I found that I actually became almost emotionally involved in the situation that I was writing about. Mm-hmm. So that was a surprise for me. I hadn't expected that.
Yeah.
But some of them got me.
Yeah.
And I realized, that change is not always negative.
Yeah.
Change can be a very positive, very liberating, very, very exciting thing. If it's approached in the right way.
Yes, and if we're open to it and willing, and we often fear change, or we because we can't see the other side of it. And I know I found that as well in my life too. And it sounds like from the creative process, that's a growing process as well, right? As you go through writing the book and you're experiencing these emotions that maybe were surprising or unexpected. But when we go there and allow ourselves to go there too, I think readers can feel that. They can feel that you went there and allowed yourself to go there too. And that's a big, I think that to me is what makes a good book, when I can feel the emotion of what the writer was getting at.
Yeah. And there are just so many instances of where it could be so different.
Yeah.
If different actions had been taken.
Yeah.
I know that the reaction of the two teenagers who met and who just were obsessed with each other after just a 2-hour sort of encounter. If they had taken different decisions and different paths, well, it would have been a wholly different life for both of them, and for their friends as well. And it's just there's the case of what might have been.
Yeah, and that's so relatable, because everybody can identify with that, right? We've all been in those situations where we've had something happen and we've looked back and maybe wished we would have done it differently, or also the other way, saw how something, like you're saying, the chance encounter so deeply can impact your life.
Yeah. So it's I think it's an interesting book, I think.
Yeah.
But that's not for me to say. That's for the readers.
So just a couple more questions here before we wrap up today. What are you most proud of about writing your book?
I'm most proud of the fact that I actually wrote it.
Yeah.
This is my first book. I haven't written anything before this, but I thought I could write it, and I have written it, and it's been published, and I'm proud of that.
Yeah.
So much so that once I had it written, and I'd held it for a number of probably a couple or 3 years, and without actually getting it published, and during that time, I wrote another book, and I've been holding it until this one gets going, and right. I will get the second one published at some point. But that's a bit different. It's not about religious difference or anything like that. It's not. It's again, it takes place in the period of the Troubles, but it's not Troubles related at all. It's a different situation. But I'm proud of the fact that I got the book written, and that has led me on to write another book as well.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Yes. And who would you say your book would appeal to, and why?
I would say my book would appeal to, I suppose, anyone who's interested in the Northern Ireland situation over that time. And anyone who is sort of wanting an alternative to the normal Northern Ireland literature that comes out, where it's about bombs and guns and bullets and all that sort of stuff. Mm-hmm. And this is not about that. This sort of, it acknowledges it in one or two places, but it's about normal everyday life in in a violent situation, but it swims against the tide that way, and that it's not one of these violence books.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've seen the Kenneth Branagh film Belfast, but it's a good movie, and it's about the part of Belfast and the violence that went on and everything else. And while that was happening, there was another life happening in other areas, where it was going on as normal. There wasn't the same sort of things happening. So it was to sort of balance the thing a bit as regards to we weren't all at each other's throats,
right?
In those days, and again, the thing about the ordinary people keeping society going and not allowing themselves to get drawn into the violence, and thereby, I think, saving Northern Ireland. So,
and they kept on living, right? They kept on going, and that's right there a metaphor for life, I think.
Yeah.
Okay, so as we wrap up today, what's one thing you want to leave the readers with to make sure that they know about your book?
I want them to know that if they read the book, they should find out that love, and I'm not talking about sexual love now, I'm talking just about love of friends, love of this, that sort of thing. But love has a way of triumphing over every other sort of emotion, or decision, and it does in the end in the book, and I'm really happy about that.
I love that message, and being able to remind ourselves of that. We all need that reminder as much as possible, I think.
We all need to love each other.
That is the bottom line. I agree. My guest this week has been Billy Menamin, author of the book Mary Whyte Was Right Pedro. Billy, thank you again for joining us today and being our guest on Books on Air.
Thank you very much, Sloan. Get your name right. Thank you very much, Sloan.
Yes, you can find more about the book Mary Whyte Was Right Pedro on Amazon, and I'll link to the book in the show notes, so be sure to check that out. You've been listening to the Books on Air podcast, brought to you on webtalkradio.net. You can also hear this podcast on Spotify, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, and Apple Podcasts. I'm Sloan Fremont, and I hope you'll join us for the next Books on Air podcast. Remember, you never know who's going to be here, and you never know what we're going to talk about. Thank you so much for listening.